Hi everyone, my name's Matthew Goodwin Freeman, and I am with Mahyar Tousi tonight from Tousi TV. An absolute treat, and we are going to discuss everything that you care about. Maya, thank you so much for coming on. First thing I've got to ask, budget day today. What was your thoughts?
Well, one thing I can actually start with saying is I cannot believe I'm about to say this, but Rishi Sunak was proven right. He did say during the election campaign, and everybody laughed at him. And I didn't really support Rishi personally, but he said within the first 100 days, Labour will wreck the country. Well, that happened. But then he also
Absolutely.
said, don't listen to Keir Starmer, he will be raising taxes. So the fascinating part about this is I'm slightly worried about the future of the country, but also for my family as well, because I have my own personal issues when it comes to security issues. I got a lot of death threats, and the establishment don't seem to care. But also on top of that, they're making things harder for me to even operate as a business in the UK. And if it continues like that, then people like me and other businesses and other individuals will have to move for the sake of my family. But this is becoming just the beginning of the lies that the Labour Party gave. Let's not forget, 14 years we had the Tory government, and that 14 years is what I call we had liberal budgets. And we had liberal governance, liberal conservative government, but now we actually have actual socialism. I made a mistake. I thought in my head before the election that okay, well, Keir Starmer winning, it's just going to be another vanilla prime minister. It's just going to be almost like status quo. It's going to be boring, more like a rubbish Tony Blair. I was wrong because he's on the edge. It's not too far from let's just say, moderate Corbynites. So he's not going around nationalizing industries, but he's literally just increasing the size of the state like there is no tomorrow. And he lied about the NHS funding. Rachel Reeves obviously made the announcement. They were supposed to be saying we're going to reform the NHS first and then give it
Absolutely.
money. Everything's completely all over the place.
Well, this is the thing, talking about the NHS, just a couple of weeks ago, Keir Starmer said, no more money for the NHS until there's reform. And then today, conveniently, there's £22 billion for the NHS. And guess what? Wasn't it a £22 billion black hole that Labour were talking to us all about? I mean, today's budget just blew the rails off everything. We now have the highest tax burden in British history. National insurance tax is up despite how they're trying to spin it now. Capital gains tax, inheritance tax, energy tax, business rates, stamp duty, everything's up. I mean, do you see a future where actually things start coming down and things get better, or is it only getting worse from here?
The problem we have with British politics and European politics in general, well, I know it's slightly different, but is that reversal of policies are very hard. So unless a radical situation happens, like the 1970s, where you would require a leader, a radical leader like Margaret Thatcher, for example, to come in and actually be forced to make radical changes, it's very hard. Tony Blair introduced so many things, constitutional and legislation-wise, that the Tories just struggled to reverse. So a lot of these ideas will be, some of them will be almost impossible politically to reverse. Some of them, I don't think we have radicalism enough in a good way, even from the Tories. I know we might talk about the Tories in general. I don't see how we can actually go back. So you can bring down the tax rate, fine, a little bit. But Starmer's government are about to start building new quangos and non-governmental bodies. And, it's the same thing when Tony Blair started doing the Supreme Court and devolution and this and that. How are you going to remove that?
Absolutely. And that's the thing. We're going to have a Quango to look into Quangos. I mean, the only good thing I guess many people will think is the fact that they've knocked a penny off of the price of a pint. I mean, do you think that's enough? We'll give you back a penny and then in return up taxes and cut services. Do you think that's going to take the British public for fools?
Well, I'm personally completely offended because I've just stopped drinking beer.
Oh,
I've moved on to spirits. So now that I've stopped drinking beer, they're bringing out the price. It's not going to change anything. It's just complete. It's lies because everything else is going up.
no.
And they can go around play with the numbers of like GDP. They'll be excited we're going to have 1% GDP growth.
Oh, yes.
That's irrelevant when you still have all the other costs and everything else and taxes on top of taxes. And what my analogy is that until now, even because of the high tax Tories like Rishi Sunak and Theresa May, we had a situation where you leave your house, you breathe air, you have to pay tax. But what Starmer's government are now doing is that they are putting tax on the air as well. So when you're breathing tax, you're breathing air, you have to be double taxed. So it's complete insanity.
Well, I mean, things aren't going to get much better, but hopefully in the next few days, the Conservatives will have a new leader. Do you see it swiftly move us on to hopefully brighter shores? So we had our Vote Watch leadership debate over the weekend, and we had teams Kemi and Team Genric battling it out and giving why any last-minute voter should vote for them. What's your thoughts on the Conservative leadership contest? Does it really matter? Are the Conservatives toast, or is this the start of the rebuild, especially given the fact Labour are so down in the polls?
At this one, it's like when Hezbollah keep changing leaders, and it doesn't really do much for the Hezbollah leadership either. It's not easy for the Tories because there is a cultural problem inside the party that they need to deal with. One could argue that 2005, David Cameron's obviously leadership and modernization of the party was relatively needed to become slightly more in touch. And that was the point of it, by the way, because everybody was like dinosaurs in the House of Commons and Tory MPs. But in the name of modernization, there was a problem because even the 2010 campaign wasn't necessarily fully in touch. That's why Cameron didn't manage to get a majority. He was going around hugging huskies or whatever and hugging trees. But then 2015, Cameron became slightly more grown up, and actually that was a good campaign, good Tories and everything else. But in reality, the party was no longer just a big tent because they kept talking about big tent, but it was a group of kind of liberal Democrat leaning Tories who basically create a new consensus. Fair enough, liberal conservatives, you're the new party, but you still have the other chunk. They're the more traditional conservatives. Now you have to make up your mind. You can still be a big tent, but you need a new consensus. You can't go around pretending to be conservative and then at the same time be controlled by the liberals who work in CCHQ, the Tory headquarters. So Robert Jenrick will struggle unless he actually reforms the central office. At the same time, Kemi Badenoch is controlled by the central office, so I don't know what's going on there. I think it'll be tough. Obviously, a lot of people still wouldn't really fully trust Jenrick because they still see him as a Cameroon. He suddenly became right wing, but he's saying the right things at least. He is saying the right things. It's just that is he just saying it for the sake of it? I don't know.
Do you have a personal preference?
Third option.
No, this was one of the questions we had.
Bring back Boris.
well, that's exactly what I was going to say. One of the questions we had on the panel was, would anyone bring back Boris? You know, would you be in favour of a coup d'etat and bring back the Boris days?
No, I mean I said that, don't it? I mean only because it's still because of Boris that Boris went down. He had a chance. He wouldn't work bringing him back, but they don't have anybody else.
Right, now the question that I've got to ask you, it's the number one thing that people said to me to put to you, is immigration. Are we ever going to get a grip of it? Are we going to put the borders up and protect this country, or is that gone? I mean, obviously, since the Labour government took charge, small boat crossings have gone up. We've had more people this year than we had last year. You know, Rwanda plan's gone, everything like that. And it seems Labour just want to smash the gangs with words. What are we doing? What's happened to this country?
Nothing's going to happen under the Labour government. But overall, it will get to a point where some government, I mean, it will be relatively centre-right government, will be forced, and as a country, there will be a consensus eventually to actually deal with illegal migration. That will eventually happen.
Yeah.
Because it's just going to get to a point where public services would be completely overwhelmed. But that doesn't really address the problem. So we could even get to a point where they would say, hypothetically, 5-year pause on asylum seekers. And we're going to focus on deportation. They could even do that. Right now, even the thought of that is radical. But eventually that will be normal if we continue like this. But it doesn't fix the problem because it's not really just about immigration. It's multiculturalism. People in politics, well, especially more center-right people, need to start having that conversation to explain to the people that there's a difference between multiculturalism and multi-ethnicity.
Yeah.
And as long as you actually believe and respect the common values of any country, and I always say, if a bunch of blondes from Germany all move to Japan, Japan will no longer be Japan. So what is the point of it? It's not really because they are blonde from Germany. It's their mentality and their customs and their traditions that are different to the Japanese culture. So that needs to be addressed, and I have a feeling it won't. And this is the new world, and there is a bit of an issue because adjustment is needed. So the Western countries are becoming simply hubs for people to live and work in.
Well,
And so, yeah.
well, I was going to ask, do you see a bit of an irony? The Conservative government tried to push through the Rwanda plan, this idea to have a deterrent, get rid of people to a third country, deal with the problem there. We were told time and time again it's not possible. Europe was up in arms. And then as soon as we've got a Labour government, now Europe are going to go do the same thing. They're looking at their own Rwanda-style policy. Germany is going to use the facilities that we, the British taxpayers, paid for in Rwanda to do exactly that. Do you just see a bit of irony here and go, hold on, hold on. This is our country. We've decided to do something and no one's going to tell us otherwise.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Brits continue to build things for other people around the world. So it's not the first time, is it?
No, no.
It goes back to the roots of the problem. The European Union is also a perfect example. The consensus in the West has been since the 50s that we're going to do basically for us, this side of the world, world peace, cooperation, trade. That's nice. That's lovely. The existence of the UN is basically just there for England and France not to have wars. It didn't really stop wars and conflicts across the world. So there's two issues. One is complacency. So people in the West, all the young people in Berlin, in London, wherever, they haven't actually experienced war. And I'm not saying it to advocate for war. I'm simply saying it's just the natural consequences of relative peace long term. That just creates complacency and obviously undermines national sovereignties. So on the one hand, there will be some people who become more nationalists. On the other hand, more people become more Tony Blair types. Like, yeah, what are you talking about? National identity? Who cares? But the other biggest problem is that the rest of the world is still in chaos and there's no level playing field. I don't blame people from North Africa and the Middle East who want to get here because you made it easier for them as well.
Yeah.
Ease of access to travel. The world is smaller. Access to
Yeah.
information. Back in the 1920s, 1940s, the people in different continents wouldn't know what's exactly going on in London. They didn't know about, like, I don't know if we even have McDonald's or whatever. But now, because the world is smaller, they all have access to seeing what's happening in America, what's happening in the UK, what sort of benefits they might get. I don't know what sort of streets they look like. So it becomes even more attractive, and the travel is easier than before. So obviously, we're going to get more immigration. So you have to adjust. All these countries need to actually have very common sense border control, but also cultural policies for the society itself.
Look, you have said stuff there which no one else would be willing to say, and that's why it's great to have you on. Mahyar Tousi, I'm really grateful. We're building VoteWatch back up again, getting as many people involved as we can. So please come back. Let's make this a regular thing, and let's say it as it is. Because frankly, the British public need to hear this because it's being covered up otherwise. So thank you so much. I'm really, really grateful.